Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we are going to use art graph and Inktense and some pastels too to create this portrait. As you can see, I have done a very similar portrait in my sketchbook, and that was one of the first times I played around with these Graf Tailor chalks. A friend of mine had shared her stash with me. You can purchase the Graf chalks and they're a lot bigger. They're actually like a water-soluble pigment stick, and they come in these like about almost 2x2 squares, and you just pick them up and sketch with them, or you can use them like watercolor pans. They're really cool. And I'm just using them to sketch on a pretty large sketchbook. It's about 11 by 14. Oh, and if you want a real-time version of this painting, you can find it in Critique Club. It is live narrated. It's a little over an hour long, so if you would like to learn step by step with me as I talk you through it live, you can go check that out. There is a link in the video description so you can find the class. And basically what I like to do is map the face out. So I'll get like the oval. I'll try to shape the face a little bit so that you've got the kind of the oval face. The chin is a little bit more squared. I usually put a line down the center to make sure I have everything symmetrical, and then a line right down the middle for the eyes. A line in between the eyes and the chin where the nose will sit, and then a line halfway in between there, which would be kind of where the line separating the upper and lower lip would be. Now, obviously, everybody's proportions are a little bit different, but that's just a great way to map out the face, and you can make adjustments within those guidelines, like moving one of the lines up a little bit or down a little bit, or so on and so forth, until you get the feature that you want. Now, I will try and remember to link the reference photo down below, and that was the same reference photo I did the first portrait in my sketchbook with as well, so you can take a look at that, or you could find photos of your own, look at your friends and family members. The thing about finding photos online that can be tricky is finding ones that have enough contrast and enough distinguished lighting, because if you're looking through magazines, a lot of times you find pictures where everything's been airbrushed to death, and you don't have the contrast, and you can't see the planes of the face because everything is meant to be super smooth and super, even, and it's not as interesting to paint. So I get a lot of my photo references from Unsplash, which is a commercial use photography site, and that's one of the ones I recommend because it's very well organized, and I just kind of look for faces that aren't, most of those pictures are not like all over airbrushed and stuff. They're a little bit more natural looking. Now I'm deciding to wet the background because I have some kind of hairy marks where I want to kind of clean up the edge of the portrait a bit, and honestly I should have done this a little bit more. If I had scrubbed into those outlines a little bit better, I could have softened them, and then it would have saved me a little bit of trouble as I worked on the portrait in the future. But I wanted to wet the sweater, the turtleneck sweater, and I wanted to wet the background and kind of get some color in there. Now from the reference photo, it looked like the man was either standing on a beach or maybe he was on a rooftop. There's kind of like nondescript, like sunset-y colors, I would say, like maybe like an hour before sunset type colors, just so soft pastel, like blue and yellow and peachy colors, and I wanted to get that in there because I thought it was a really nice contrast, and it wasn't stark white. And I think it's nice if you don't have such a stark background, especially when you have such a dark complexion. You want to have a little bit of warmth and color that you can draw from. And also the highlights in this gentleman's face were very influenced by the sky. They had a little bit of a little blue-gray kind of tint to them, so I wanted to make sure I had some of that color in the background. My camera was acting a little crazy because I had it on the auto setting instead of on the there's a couple scene settings I use that can sometimes give me better results when I'm filming tutorials. Between the wet background and the contrast, it's kind of blowing out the color in the background there. So bear with me. We will actually go in there and darken that up a little bit too. So I'm just getting a basic wash here, and I know it looks really unrefined, but with this product, this art graph, I find that it acts almost like a gouache, and you end up building up layers. So that first layer may look a little gritty and rough. They're not as smooth as watercolors. So generally when I'm painting portraits, I go for my Lucas watercolors because I just find they do portraiture and figurative work so well. These are are, first of all, a new product to me. I've just been playing with them this week, and I'm still getting to learn the ins and outs. And also, they are a little bit more gritty and a little bit more opaque. Just a little, they're different. They're different ball of wax, and, getting used to them. Rather than having stark white eyeballs, I did actually tone them a little bit. I put some color in there, and then I ended up scrubbing most of it off, but I did want a bit of a stain on the paper so that it wouldn't be bright white, because your whites of your eyes are never bright white. That will look a little strange. And you can see that I tried to readjust the ear there, and it just kind of spread. So this is the opportunity for me to go back in with more color in the background, since even without the camera blowing it out, I still thought it was a little too light. So I wanted to go in and add some more darkness and, kill two birds with one stone, kind of take care of that edge that wasn't quite right while I was at it. Now, Artgraph does make a white chalk, but I don't have it. I'm using the Inktense blocks instead, because I found the Inktense to be just about the same type of product as the Artgraph. So if you already have Inktense, I would say go ahead and use those. They're less expensive and you get a better variety of colors. But then again, you could be spoiled for choice, meaning you have so many colors it could be a little overwhelming. So it's hard to say. And of course, the Artgraph shape is fun. But they're both very similar products. I just want to say that in case you have one, that unless you want those particular colors or that particular shape, you really don't need to go and get the others, because they're like, I would say, about 95% the same product. So you can do what you want to do, but I like to, when I find really close similarities, I like to make a note of that. So right now I am just blocking in colors because I liked that more opaque gouache-like effect on the face. I felt that it really captured the like texture of the skin a lot better, and also just looked a lot more rich and robust. And so I'm going in and I'm really putting in those bold colors. I'm putting in my undertones and my shadows first. So that's why we've got those bright reds and siennas and like almost eggplanty browns. And I know it looks extremely harsh right now, but it's honestly, guys, I know a lot of watercolors don't do this, but I think it's so beneficial. Go in with your darks first. Even with watercolor, I like to go in with my darks first because it's scary, but once you get them down, you don't have anything else to be afraid of in the painting. That seems to be the scariest part. And then you don't end up spending hours fiddling around trying to get your darks dark enough. You go in there and you get them in dark, and then you add your lights, and then you're not afraid anymore of getting those darker tones in there. Working dark to light, and then if you're working with something like gouache or oils or oil pastel or soft pastel, if you don't put those darks in first, the whites just gobble up all of the other colors. So you need those darker tones to, to be established first, or the whites are it's the opacity of the whites that just kind of, overtake everything. So you want to get those darks in first, so you'll have enough, basically. It's easier to scrub the whites out that are on top if you do end up getting too much in there. And another thing I want to mention about when you're working with a darker skin tone and you're using white, I don't recommend using straight white in there because it can look very unnatural. You need to warm that up. You need to add some yellow ochre into it, maybe even some sepia or some sanguine, some brown. You're going to want to add something to that. Maybe even a little bit of blue if you're doing like a really bright highlight and you've got natural daylight influencing your highlight, because just plain white is just not going to cut it. It's going to look very unnatural and very weird. And I've struggled with that because if I'm painting a portrait, I paint my daughters a lot as portrait subjects, and they're very light skinned, and they have cooler undertones. So painting somebody with darker skin and warmer undertones is like painting in a different language, because your undertones are different, your way of operating can be different, so that you don't end up with things you do to get that nice creamy complexion. Peaches and cream complexion are not what you want to do when you have a rich kind of cocoa-like complexion. You will just kind of turn it to muck. It'll look like chalk, So you want to definitely make sure your highlights have some of the tones, the undertones in there, and you want to make sure that it's got the colors of the highlights that are being reflected. So now I'm going ahead and putting in the irises because it was a little unnerving to just have like plain white eyeballs looking at you. And this still, it's not, it looks funny until it gets done. it looks very awkward in so many stages here. And this is when I say, you know, you got to work through the hot mess stage. And that happens, especially if it's a medium that you're new with. You're going to have a longer hot mess stage than you are with something that you're familiar with. And it can, and sometimes other people will be like, that's, you know, they'll see the same amount of hot mess stage no matter what you're working in. But the fact that you can see beyond the hot mess stage with a material that you're familiar with is probably all the difference. Because I was just thinking, oh, am I going to be able to pull this off? Honestly, in my head, I was thinking, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this off. How did I do that in my sketchbook? And I'm not able to do this while I'm talking about it and doing it live to tape. I was kind of really getting worried that I wasn't going to be able to get it to turn out. But then you kind of turn a corner and you start to see that, oh, the textures are turning out all right. My colors are turning out all right. Oh, I remember how I did this. And you get there. Now, one thing I liked better about this portrait than the first one is that I got the nose shape better in this one. The nose in the one that's up there on the left-hand side from my sketchbook, that nose wasn't right. It's a fine-looking nose, but it wasn't that person's nose. And I feel like I was able to shape the planes of the face better on this one. We're not done yet, though. I ended up having to restructure the face a little bit because I got him too thin. But, you know, that's a great thing about products like gouache or art graph or Inktense is that they do have that opacity to them and that reworkability. So you can go in and kind of sculpt. It's like you're sculpting. On the lips, to get the really full look, I'm putting in a darker color towards the edge, and then I am bringing in the brighter and lighter colors towards the center. The top lip generally is darker because it's facing angled down, so you don't get the highlights on it, and the bottom lip tends to be lighter because it's rounded out and it will get more highlights on it. And by doing that darker color on the edges, the pointy edges of the mouth, it's almost gonna push that back and make the lips seem fuller. And that's actually a makeup trick you could do is if you wear lipstick, if you wear darker lipstick at the corners of your mouth and on the top lip, and then you have a lighter highlight on the bottom lip, you can actually make it look like your lips are fuller. So just a little makeup tip there if you want to try that sometime. So here I am widening out the face because he was a little too thin. And it was making him look older than what the reference photo and my sketchbook gentleman looked like. So I am widening out the face, softening the features a little bit, but I did want to make sure to keep that really angled jaw because I thought that was very, very interesting. And I love all the different planes of the face. I think it just is sculptural and looks pretty cool. And now I am taking I grabbed a few pastels, just some really like pale shade pastels, and I'm going into the background and just kind of cleaning up the edges of the portrait where it got a little smudgy and just adding some more color back there. And now I'm going in with a Conte crayon, which is like a hard pastel. It's like a hard chalky pastel. And I'm putting in some highlights. I will smooth some out with my fingers, but I kind of like leaving the brush, the strokes there, but that's up to you. You don't have to do that. And if you do get too much or it looks too harsh or too bright, you can go in with a damp brush and you can it's kind of like erasing it, but what you're doing is just kind of making it a little more transparent so it mixes in with the paint that you have underneath. So it's completely up to you if you want to do this step and how much you want to do. I tend to go almost making it look a little too severe, and then I'll go in and blend it or go in with a damp brush and kind of like smooth it out a little bit just to get the effect that I want. It's kind of like a push and pull type of process when you're doing this, I think. I like to use the little Conte crayons because they're small and you can break them to get a nice sharp point, and you can just kind of go in there and get some better details sometimes, and they're nice and opaque. And plus I'm just very free with the Conte crayons because I've always used them for like life drawing classes and quick sketches, and it's kind of like a familiar tool that gets the job done, and I really like it. That's not a very expensive supply. Well, you can actually get smaller Conte sketching sets that will have like a black, a white, a gray, and a couple of browns, which will do the trick. This set I think has a couple sticks of each color. Oh, it's got like 4 blacks, and it's got a couple sanguines, and a couple, like a sepia and a white and a gray. Might have two. I'm not sure. I think it's 12 sticks in all, about $20. But you can definitely just get the sticks in the colors that you like. And I wanted to get some more texture in the hair, so I'm using that black Conte and then going in with the gray and just kind of like scribbling a bit here and there to get the highlights in the hair and get that texture of that like really closely cropped curly hair. And I'm also using the gray as my final highlights on the skin because white just looked weird, and that blue gray in the background, that gray just looks like it has enough of that blue undertone to make it make sense that was the natural daylight that is influencing the highlight on his skin. I'm going in with a Conte crayon. I am adding some more shadow to the lips. I'm adding some definition to the lips. I'm adding the line under the nose because it had gotten really too blurry. I'm using the sanguine Conte crayon to warm up some of the shadows and also on the lips. And I'm just shading that top lip a little bit more. And under the nose a little bit more. So there's a lot of fussing around with this, but I'm pretty happy with how it all turned out in the end. Now, of course, I'm going to mess with this a little bit more because I don't have the shaping on the nose quite right yet. And it's just kind of a refinement process here because I do feel like I've got most of the face mapped out well, the shape's pretty well, and it's just kind of getting the texture of the skin, getting the tones, the highlights, and the undertones right. And this is kind of the fun part of the portrait when it's like, okay, phew, I got everything in the right place now, and I've got most of the hard work done. Now I can just kind of play with the pretty parts. I can add those pretty little nuanced colors that are coming in from the background, and I can just kind of mess around a little bit. And this is that technique I told you about with using a wet brush to kind of soften any little highlights that you've done with a Conte. So if anything looks too bold, you just damp brush. That's all you need to do. The water kind of makes the chalky pigments or binder or whatever, it just kind of makes it almost disappear and just morph into what you have underneath. So it's a great way to soften any highlights you've put down that are too harsh. Now, I did want to just ever so slightly nudge some of my colors, so I grabbed my pastel pencils, and on top of all of this, they're not really going to lay down too much because they're harder than the Conte crayon and they're harder than the pastels and the art graph that I was using, but I can lay down just a little bit, and it's just that little bit of refinement. I mean, at this stage of the game, we're not doing anything drastic to the portrait. Anything we're doing is just subtle and nuanced. That's like when we're painting, when we're like watercoloring, and we switch to smaller brushes towards the end. It's not that we can't handle that detail with a bigger brush. We just don't want to bring that much paint over that we're going to be messing with it. Now here I'm using a kneaded eraser just to pull out a little bit of that too bright blue highlight I have at the top and soften that a little bit. But make sure you don't accidentally take up too much pigment from places that you want to keep it, because that can definitely happen with a kneaded eraser. And there you have it. I mean, that's pretty much it. You can add more color to the background, you can add any other details you like, but that's as far as I am going to go with this portrait, and I hope you enjoyed it. You can find a real-time version of this in Critique Club, link in the video description. Thank you so much for watching, and please give me a thumbs up before you go. Until next time, happy crafting!